Have you ever wondered what happened before the Human Covenant War, before Halo? How humanity grew to power and why things are the way they are? Halo lore is fun because it ties into our real history. For example, World War II is actually in Halo lore. So today we're going to recap the development of human history between pretty much 2018 all the way to the Human Covenant War. So it's going to be a good one, guys. Let's go ahead and get into it. World War II was a life and world-changing event, and actually is officially a part of Halo lore. It was a struggle of Europe between the Axis and Allied powers, eventually with the Allied powers winning and ending the war in 1945. One of the positive effects was the UN being set up, which would later be the foundation for the UNSC as we know it in the 2100s. By 1999, Halo the video game is unveiled at Macworld Expo in New York. Now, I kind of doubt that Halo the game was actually something in Halo lore that was actually unveiled there. But I think it's funny, I think it's just kind of humorous to think that that is actually something that did happen in Halo lore. So, hell, why not? Let's just let it happen. Unfortunately, nothing else is officially confirmed by Halo lore in 2018, but we can suspect things are just about the same as in canon as in real life. And yes, that includes all the ridiculous memes that technically existed around this time. Is there any information about memes in Halo lore? I desperately want to know this. If you guys know, let me know down in the comments. By 2021, the International Society of Civil Engineers is created, the same organization that created the Quinto Space Tether on Earth 300 years later in 2313, which interestingly enough is actually this station, Orbital, that is set up that we can actually play on in Halo 3. By 2080, Earth's nations had started working together to begin colonizing the Moon, Mars, and other places in the solar system, such as several asteroids and moons. By 2129, the first iterations of the ODSTs were created. With the interplanetary war taking place about 3 decades later, the role of the Orbital Drop Shock Trooper Marines had become an important part of the UNSC and in humanity's military power overall. Meanwhile, in 2142, the Covenant stumbled upon the homeworld of the Ungoi world of Bala Ho, which ended in the immediate surrender and were implemented into the Covenant. By 2163, the Rainforest Wars took place in South America that was almost as devastating as World War II and lasted only about 10 months. The war started because of ideological differences and took place around the solar system on different moons as well, but ultimately Earth suffered the most from terrible famine. It was only a few years later, around 2170, that humanity found itself overpopulated and a military presence with no enemy to fight. By 2178, the secretive organization of ONI is founded as the intelligence service of the UNSC. In 2215, April 20th, Wallace Fujikawa is born. He will later become the co-creator of the Shaw-Fujikawa slip space drive, which later earned a Nobel Prize for the discovery of slip space travel, making everything possible we see in the Halo games and books, and everything in the coming centuries. And it was actually officially created in 2291 at the end of the century. Although in 2218, the Scorpion tank is introduced to the military, but besides all that, not much else is known about the 2200s. In 2302, at the wake of the century, New Mombasa is selected to be the first Earth city to have a space elevator, and is completed about 11 years after. In 2319, the first prototype of the M12 Warthog is created, and then 4 years later, the first attempt at the Orion project was conducted by ONI, aka the Spartan project is attempted. The project yielded terrible results and was put on the back burner for about 170 years, until 2491. In 2332, the Ross Ziegler blip discovered a stratigraphic event, the evidence of the Halo rings firing over 100,000 years ago. By the end of the century, 2390, human colonization is under full way. Over 200 human-controlled worlds are in stages of terraforming and the population has been largely stabilized. In 2412, the M6 Magnum is produced, and 20 years later, the planet of Arcadia is first colonized and becomes a tourist outer colony attraction for its lush jungles and biomes. This planet was a key location in Halo Wars 1 and is in fact in many places playable in the game. In 2432, the planet of Meridian is colonized by colonists from France back on Earth, and is later seen in Halo 5. The year 2437 is when the assault rifle is introduced to the military, and the sniper rifle we know and love in 2460, about 23 years later. In 2461, the single-occupant exo-atmospheric insertion vehicle is introduced to the UNSC, or in other words, the drop pod was created to get troops behind enemy lines. Meanwhile, a year later, 2462, the Grunt Rebellion occurs, and before it ends, the homeworld is partially glassed, and the Ungoi get their place in the Covenant. In 2468, the iconic colony of Harvest is marked as the 17th human colony, and 2 years later, the Spirit of Fire begins construction. In 2475, rebellions get worse across human colonies against the UNSC. More civilian outbreaks and rebellions worse the decade later in 2483 in the outer colonies. And by 2485, Velvedam, the Arbiter that we all know and love and all cherish, is born on Synchelios. 3 years later, the Sectionist Union, aka the Rebels, demand freedom from Earth's government. 2488, the planet Harvest becomes a key planet in producing crops and fruit. In 2489, Jumadama, the post-Covenant radical leader and terrorist, is also born on Synchelios. By the end of the century, around 2490, humanity has colonized over 800 planets across the Milky Way. The Orion project is also finally reinstated after being dormant for more than 100 years, as the need for super soldiers has become very clear that it is now a must. Now we enter the 2500s, the century where the Human Covenant War begins and ends. Now, it may be a surprise, but Half-Life 3 still hasn't released by this time. Between 2510 and 2511, the future candidates for the Spartan 2 program are born, including John, born on 2511, March 7th. Other characters are also born between these 2 years, including Atriox, Thomas Lasky, Edward Buck, Michael Sullivan, Naomi, Blue Team, Red Team, Summa Noble Team, and even the UNSC Pillar of Autumn's commissioned into service. A year later, the Superintendent was created, a dumb AI that managed New Mombasa. In 2515, the Monier Powered Assault Armor begins development. 2 years later, 2517 in August, the 6-year-olds, including John, are kidnapped and replaced with Flash clone duplicates, and the Spartan 2 program initiates. And by 2525, the first contact of the Covenant threat is met on planet Harvest, and you know the rest. For the next 3 decades, there was massive losses, plenty of colonies destroyed, plenty of technology destroyed, and plenty of people that have died. About 62% of the human population had been wiped out by the Covenant in the war, the 3-decade-long war. Humanity only had a few victories along the way, but in the end, they managed to come out on top and become the superior race in the galaxy. For a few years, until Cortana comes and takes everything over. So guys, what did you find most interesting in this video? Would you want more videos like this, perhaps detailing the Human Covenant War and how it started and how it ended? And did you learn anything new? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe here on Halo Follower for all your Halo news, needs, and entertainment. I will see you in the next one. Guys, thank you so much for your time, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.